and welcome to the Kink Perspective. My name's Chris. I'm a psychotherapist and consultant. Today, guys, I want to sit with something that most people in relationships, and especially in the lifestyle, have felt, but they don't really say out loud. Why we go back. Now, you can understand your pattern and still walk straight back into it. That's the tension. Insight on one side, behavior on the other. And somehow, they don't always line up. So today, this is going to be a conversation about sitting on, I've been sitting on for a couple of months, something I wanted to do a while ago that I've seen played out in sessions, in power exchange dynamics, marriages that look solid from the outside. I've seen it in people who can't, they can explain attachment theory better than their therapist, but guess what? They still end up in the same emotional terrain. Now, before we go any further, as I always do, I want to say thank you to everyone who continues to listen, share the show, and reach out about these conversations. Most recently, I had a really nice email from somebody in Germany. Thank you. I'm listening. I'm changing. I'm evolving. So I appreciate it, right? I read more of your messages than you all probably think. So if you're new here, welcome, right? I'm glad you found your way in. And if this podcast has been useful to you, do me a favor, consider following or rating the show on Spotify. If you're on the app, hit it with 5 stars. That allows other people to find the show. Or if you're subscribing on YouTube, subscribe, hit the little bell button. Guess what? That way you're going to know when new shows drop. And if you want to support the work directly, there is a donation link in the show's description. That support keeps these conversations going. All right, let's get back to this now. Now, when I say a pattern, I'm not talking about something dramatic or even extreme. I'm talking about the relationship dynamics you keep recreating, the type of dominant or submissive you feel pulled towards, right? The arguments that circle back to the same sore spot, the attraction that feels electric but definitely unstable, or that urge to pull away the moment something starts to feel steady. Patterns are emotional habits. Attraction pulls, power exchange rhythms, right? Avoidance strategies that once protected you and really never got an update. So, this isn't about stupidity. It's not about weakness. It's not about you should know better. It's about wiring. Your nervous system learns what it feels, how all that stuff from before is familiar long before your mind knows what's healthy. And familiar can feel like home even when it hurts. And that's what we're going to unpack today, why we go back. So, what we're going to start with is insight is cognitive, but patterns are physiological. So, let's break this down a little bit further. All right. First, insight lives in thought. We've discussed this before. And patterns live in the body. I've mentioned this to you all before. That's the split, though, most people don't account for. You can sit across from me and explain your attachment style. You can name your childhood dynamics. You can tell me exactly why the last 3 relationships ended the way they did. And guess what? You're going to see it clearly. And then you meet someone new and your shoulders drop, your body relaxes a little bit before your brain has evaluated anything. That's not stupidity. It's not being dumb. It's not knowing better. That's just the wiring. Your nervous system does not care about your intellectual understanding here. It cares about what's familiar. It scans for what feels known to you. Known gets coded as safe, even if what's known hurt you before. Familiar does not always mean healthy. It means recognizable. So if you grew up around unpredictability, intensity feels like a real big connection. And I've said this before, if love was loud or chaotic, hot and cold, your body can register calm as flat or suspicious, even boring. And you tell yourself, a story about that. Convince yourself, you know what, they're nice, but I don't feel that spark. They're solid, but there's something missing. Maybe I'm just not that attracted to them. But what's missing here isn't the chemistry, it's activation. The body is quiet, and quiet can feel wrong if you're used to all that noise. And in kink spaces, this gets more layered. Intensity is part of the dynamic, right? Power exchange amplifies all of our sensations: adrenaline, anticipation, the surrender, the control. That nervous system lights up like a Christmas tree. And that lighting can sometimes feel like depth, but activation and intimacy are not the same thing. And you're going to say to yourself, but Chris, you've talked about this before. Why? Why now? Well, because these patterns keep showing up, and they show up in different levels, right? So this is needed. And here, when we look at this, you can feel intensely bonded to someone who destabilizes you. You can feel connected in a dynamic that keeps you slightly off balance because the body reads intensity as aliveness. But here's the real truth you need to sit with: the body chooses before the mind explains, right? You feel the pull, then your brain builds the case. Oh, this time it's different. They just understand me. We just need to communicate better. The explanation comes after the whole physiological reaction. That's why insight alone doesn't stop the pattern. Insight lives in part of you that reflects. Patterns live in the part of you that reacts. And reacting feels more, feels faster. It convinces you it's real. I know this in my core, right? You can know something is bad for you and still feel calm around it, right? You can know something's good for you and feel restless in it. That doesn't make you broken. It just means your nervous system was trained in a certain environment and it hasn't fully recalibrated yet. So when chaos has been home, calm feels foreign. When intensity hasn't met love, steadiness can feel empty. So the work isn't about shaming yourself for the pull. The pull makes sense. The work is about recognizing that the body's first signal is not always the best guide for your long-term well-being. Yeah, but Chris, I know, I feel it inside of me, right? This time it's different. Yeah, but then it becomes uncomfortable because it means growth doesn't feel electric. And if it feels slow or quiet or almost boring, right? People shift. And for a lot of people, that's the hardest shift at all. So I've been talking about this calm for a while. I've been bringing it up in episodes over the last few months and kind of really hammering it out for a lot of people. And I'm not talking about it to hammer this into your minds. It's because these same patterns keep showing up. So let's talk about why or when calm feels wrong for us. And there is a moment most people don't say this stuff out loud. Because here's the scenario: you finally meet someone, they're stable, consistent, their tone doesn't swing, right? They don't disappear for 3 days and then reappear with some sort of intensity, right? They're not testing you and they don't keep you, off balance. Instead of relief, you feel restless. It's not wrong or it's not unsafe, just unsettled. Healthy dynamics can feel boring when your nervous system is trained on unpredictability. So if you grew up around inconsistency or emotional volatility or love that had to be earned, your body learned to equate activation with attachment. The spike became the signal. When something felt uncertain, your system leaned in. When it felt calm, it didn't quite know what to do with itself. So predictability can trigger agitation in someone who has wired themselves around scanning for that change. Stability removes the need to scan. Now, that sounds good in theory, but for a nervous system trained to be on constant high alert, that absence of any fluctuation could feel like a total loss of stimulation, right? So the body starts looking for something to react to. And that's where people start misinterpreting feelings. They're going to say there's no chemistry, this feels flat, something's missing. What actually may be missing is the adrenaline. Because when you're bonded through that intensity before, the intensity becomes the marker of your depth. And then you've got intermittent reinforcement, affection that comes and goes, attention that spikes, then withdrawals. And I've written about that before, right? It creates this strong attachment. I wrote an article a while ago called, dangling the carrot stick. And I talked about this. And when all this is going on, the brain releases dopamine in anticipation, not just as a reward. So the uncertainty strengthens the pull. Adrenaline bonds are powerful because they blend fear and attraction. So you feel alive around the person because your system is activated. And that activation can feel like connection. And it's not necessarily a connection, it's arousal layered onto attachment. And then let's jump, how does this play into the lifestyle? This can become even more complicated because power exchange steps in, and it can be profoundly stabilizing when it's grounded in our negotiations and our consent and emotional maturity and rules and protocols. It also can become a container for unresolved attachment patterns. Dominance can be, mistaken for security, and submission can be mistaken for safety. The structure of the dynamic can temporarily quiet anxiety, but if the attachment underneath is unstable, the intensity becomes the glue. So, unpredictability here stimulates, and stimulation attaches. Instability creates longing. And the more uncertain the bond, the more energy the nervous system invests in maintaining it. And that's why you feel tired and drained. Calm does not spike the system in the same way. Calm asks your body to downshift, to slow down. And for someone used to running on activation all the time, downshifting can feel like a withdrawal. Why? Because there's no chase, there's no edge, there's no sudden urge to, reassurance here. It's just steady. And steadiness requires tolerance. And this is why people leave good relationships and return to familiar ones. Not because they want the pain, but because their nervous system equates familiarity with safety. So chaos can feel more like home than peace. And a dynamic that keeps you slightly braced can feel more authentic than one that lets you soften because your body chooses first. The mind builds meaning around the choice, right? So you're going to tell yourself you need passion or you crave their depth or even that spark and how much that's going to matter to you. And sometimes it does. And sometimes what you're craving is activation, not intimacy. So when calm feels wrong, it's usually because your system has not learned to associate calm with safety. That recalibration takes time. It feels slow. God, it even is going to feel flat. It requires you to sit in the absence of intensity without manufacturing it. That's where most people go back. And this is then the story we tell ourselves when we do. So when someone returns to a familiar dynamic, they rarely frame it as repetition. No one wakes up and says, you know what, I'm reenacting something my nervous system already knows. No one speaks like that. I don't speak like that, and I know the language, right? But the language here sounds far more reasonable than that. It sounds thoughtful and mature, hopeful even. This time it'll be different. They're just under a lot of stress right now. We need better communication. Maybe I overreacted. The chemistry is rare, and you don't walk away from that. That's the story layer, the cognitive overlay that protects the attachment once the pull has already happened. Now, by the time you're building a narrative, the body is usually chosen. There was a feeling, a softening, a charge, and a familiarity, right? Then the mind steps in to organize it into something coherent. And the brain does not like the internal conflict. If you see red flags but still feel, attached, tension has to be resolved somehow. Now, most of the time, it gets resolved by reshaping the interpretation rather than questioning the attachment. And oh my gosh, I can hear all these little alarm bells going off in people's heads right now. Ding, ding, ding. Oh, yes, I see myself. I know. I know. But this is a rationalization in its most human form. It's not stupidity. It's not denial. Don't say you're dumb. Don't do that. It's about the human condition. Rationalization is the mind trying to reduce discomfort. So if you view yourself as self aware and strong, it's difficult to admit that you're pulled towards something destabilizing. So you tell a different story here. You tell yourself you're choosing depth over fear, right? You're being patient instead of reactive. And that growth is uncomfortable, and the discomfort must mean you are on the right path. And then guess what? My favorite comes in. And this is my favorite of all. right? Because I see this time and time again. I'm drinking a little water here because we're going to get into this one because this is the big thing here. Red flags get mixed and minimized in such subtle ways. Inconsistency becomes complexity. Mixed signals become passion. Emotional volatility, well, guess what? That becomes intensity. So you start grading behavior on a curve because you want the connection to work. Each incident is evaluated in isolation rather than as a part of the pattern. The mind keeps narrowing the frame so it does not have to confront the larger picture, right? A little bit of denial. And guess what? When we look at the lifestyle, this becomes even more layered. Power exchange provides our structure and our clarity, our intimacy, our desires, our erotic connection. So when it's built on it's built on emotional stability. It can also disguise repetition when attachment insecurity hides underneath the roles. A dominant who's inconsistent here can be reframed as powerful and unpredictable and exciting in new ways, right? And a sub who overfunctions and ignores their own discomfort can be framed as devoted or resilient. Now, control can feel like security and surrender can feel like safety. The roles absorb the tension that might otherwise expose instability. Guess what we do with that? This becomes the chemistry argument, right? And it's one of the strongest narratives people use. Chemistry feels rare and it feels urgent, meaningful. When the connection is intense, it can seem irrational to walk away simply because something feels off. The mind tells you that rare experience require tolerance. It tells you not to be rigid. It tells you to give more time. And each time you return, the narrative gets smoother. The justifications become a lot quicker. You've got that script on speed dial, right? You stop questioning the pattern and you start defending it. The story is powerful because it protects hope. And if you admit the pattern is repeating, you've got to face the loss. And you have to face the possibility that what feels electric is not sustainable. So the mind edits the reality just enough to keep the attachment intact. And that is how we go back, not blindingly, but convincingly. But Chris, what actually breaks the pattern? My God, I'm so glad you asked. Now, look, knowing all this, having all of this insight alone does not break the pattern. You can understand yourself deeply and still repeat the same dynamics, relationships, marriages, uh, BDSM lifestyle stuff, all of it can still be done. Pain alone does not break it either. Most people have been hurt enough times to know better. And shame definitely does not break the cycle. Shame usually drives you straight back into the very thing you're trying to escape because it makes you want relief. So, what actually breaks it? Now, usually it's not some sort of dramatic awakening or epiphany. It's not a perfectly worded boundary or even, a single therapy session where everything clicks, which is what I usually pull off, right? What breaks a pattern is much less cinematic than that. It's the exhaustion. It's the moment when the cost finally outweighs the familiarity. It's that whole realization that the hit of intensity is no longer worth the aftermath. So, guess what? You reach a point where you are just simply tired of explaining or negotiating with yourself or managing someone else's instability. You're tired of feeling activated all the time. And at some point, the nervous system stops romanticizing the chaos because the wear and tear becomes undeniable. And self respect starts to outweigh longing. And that is the subtle shift. And it doesn't happen overnight. For a long time, longing wins. Longing tells you that connection matters more than the comfort. Longing tells you that if you just hold on a bit more, something's going to stabilize. But self respect is quieter and steadier. It says that this is costing you too much. It says, I am allowed to want something that does not keep me braced. So breaking the pattern requires tolerating discomfort without immediately trying to soothe it. And that's the part most people avoid. When you stop engaging in something familiar, your body's going to protest. You're going to get restless or lonely, bored. You question what you're doing. You wonder if you made a mistake. So, because the absence of intensity can feel like an absence of meaning. If you are used to an electric state, right? Steady feels flat at first. And I remember sitting with somebody, they were telling me why this person was not good for them and how they just, they think they were going to end their relationship. So, as I do, I probed and I asked and I said, what's wrong? Are they mistreating you? No. Are they not, their words don't align with their actions? No, they're thoughtful and they're there. And my face kind of changed. And this person asked me, well, what's wrong? And I said, you're there's no intensity. Your body's not reacting because they're calm. They're showing up, they're meeting you, they're engaging, they're negotiating, their their actions meet their words. Everything is on the right. Everything is lining up, and your body's pushing against it. And then it was like an epiphany happened, right? Sitting in calm long enough to normalize is real work here. The first time you're with someone consistent, you may find yourself scanning for something to react to, and that's what this person did. The first time you don't chase someone who pulls away, you might feel like you're missing out. You know, the first time you say no to a dynamic that used to light you up, but that quiet afterward can feel heavier than the chaos ever did. And this is where the recalibration happens because it has to. Not the insight, but the repetition of something new, a change in your behavior. You let your nervous system experience something different, and you do not abandon it at the first sign of boredom or uncertainty, right? You allow your body to learn that calm doesn't equal danger, right? It doesn't equal emptiness. And that predictable doesn't mean passionless, because over time, your system will adjust. The spike is no longer the only signal you recognize. The absence of anxiety starts to feel like safety instead of dullness. And the lack of drama starts to feel like peace instead of loss. So choosing steady over electric isn't glamorous. There's no fanfare. It does not give you a rush and it doesn't make you, it doesn't really create that dramatic story. It feels anticlimactic, but it builds something electric never could. What breaks a pattern is not force, it's consistency. It's choosing differently enough times that your body stops craving what once felt like home. And it's allowing the discomfort of change without running back to what's familiar just to get quiet. Look, there's no grand transformation arc here. There's a series of small, quiet decisions. And each one says, I'm not going back this time. And eventually, your system will believe you. Yeah, but what about the whole withdrawal phase that no one talks about? Well, that's a good point. We have to talk about that because that's a difficult part. Because when you stop repeating a pattern, there is that phase almost no one prepares you for. I do my best, right? We can't always predict it. No one can really predict it. Now, it doesn't feel triumphant. There's no enlightenment here. And it, it often feels worse before it feels better because your loneliness goes up, your restlessness goes up, you question your decisions, right? You start craving that old intensity, even if you know it destabilized you, even if it was chaotic. This is the withdrawal phase. And it's rarely talked about honestly. And I'm going to talk about it because we need to talk about it. Because then when we're in it, we can recognize it and we can say, this is normal. When you remove a familiar dynamic, you're not just walking away from a person or a role, you're stepping away from a regulation strategy. The dynamic did something for you. It activated you, soothed you, distracted you. It gave your nervous system a familiar rhythm to move inside. So when that rhythm is gone, that silence can feel loud. And you may find yourself checking your phone more often or replaying conversations, you know, ruminating in your mind about romantic moments that, were actually inconsistent. And then guess what? Your mind's going to edit out all the worst parts, right? And amplify the best ones. It's like seeing a crappy movie. We only remember the trailer because that's where the best parts were, right? You're going to remember that intensity, not the anxiety that came with it. And you might tell yourself you were too rigid, too cautious. not open enough. And then you're going to start reframing the instability as the passion again. The brain is very persuasive when it wants relief, right? This is not proof you made the wrong choice. It's proof your system is adjusting. And when you are used to activation, calm can feel like deprivation. When you are used to all that unpredictability, stability can feel unfamiliar enough to trigger any lingering doubt you have. Your body is looking for the spike it used to rely on. So without it, there is a temporary sense of flatness. But flatness is not a failure, it's recalibration. Think about any habit you've ever broken. The first stretch without it feels off. Your body expects the old stimulus, right? It does not get it. There's a gap. It feels uncomfortable. Most people interpret the discomfort as a sign of return, and in reality, it's the nervous system learning a new baseline. If you stay with it long enough, something will shift. That loneliness softens into space. Restlessness, I promise you, will ease. And the absence of chaos stops feeling like emptiness and starts feeling like relief. But you have to tolerate the in between. And this is where most people go back, not because they're incapable of change, but because they misinterpret withdrawal as evidence they chose wrong. And if you're in that phase right now, understand what is happening. Your body is just adjusting to a new kind of safety. It's not fully trusted yet, it's not fully mapped out yet. It just takes repetition and time. If you spent 4 months in a relationship that was bad for you and destabilized you, then don't you think it's at least reasonable you spend half that time trying to sort yourself out? Just sit with that discomfort, right? Because discomfort doesn't mean you failed. It means you're learning how to live without the spike, and learning always feels strange before it feels stable, people. And I know, I can feel you out there listening to this and shaking your head and understanding. But Chris, if I just go back, you're not going to change it. All you're going to do is edit yourself to live in the chaos. So before I close this out today, I want to be very clear about what this is and isn't. I'm not telling you who to love or how to play or what kind of dynamic you should choose. It's not about flattening kink into pathology or pretending intensity has no place in real connection. It wasn't about shaming desire, and this is all about awareness today. Patterns are not proof you're broken. They're proof that your nervous system learned something early and learned it well. And if you find yourself pulled towards the same type of partner, the same emotional rhythm, the same kind of power exchange that runs hot and unstable, that doesn't make you defective. It just makes you human. But once you see it, you don't get to hide behind it. And you know where I see a lot of this? I see this in these dating shows where, men and women want to date each other so they get matched up by people or experts or whatever. And they sit there. I always date the gruff guy with tattoos, the bad boy. But at the end, 3 months in, he's already sleeping with somebody else. How many times does this happen? My last 9 relationships. All right, so we'll give you a really calm, stable guy, no tattoos, completely different, solid job. He's not crouch surfing. He's there for you. He listens. He wants a partner. They come back. I don't like this. We're not compatible. There's no spark, right? None of that. And if you see these types of shows, you're going to see what I'm talking about in real time. Because that's what I see. These types of people can't tolerate the discomfort, right? Now, there is a shift that happens when awareness moves from theory to responsibility. You can't unknow what you recognize. And you can't keep calling it chemistry if you know it's activation. And you can't keep calling it depth if it's volatility, right? Change doesn't require a dramatic reinvention. It starts smaller than that. It looks like slowing down attraction instead of sprinting towards it. It looks like questioning intensity instead of worshiping it like a god. It looks like choosing the person who is steady over the one who is electric, even when your body leans the other way. Yeah, but Chris, this girl was so hot. She partied every weekend, and even though I'm not a drinker, so you compromised yourself. That's what I'm hearing. Compromised the value you have to chase an aesthetic. and gave way to something you don't like, in hopes to create what? Stability, which it wasn't going to bring. I'm not saying the young woman who liked to drink is wrong. If that's what she enjoys on her weekends, that's what she enjoys. But if he's at home reading a book and she's out partying, that's an incompatibility. I'm not saying you can't be individuals. You absolutely can. But if one person is looking for someone that's going to join them every weekend out drinking, and the other one just wants to stay home and read books and be more introverted, those two, personality types may clash. They can work. I'm not saying it's not possible, but they will more than likely clash, right? In relationships, a lot of this means tolerating calm enough to see what grows. And when we get into BDSM, it means asking whether a dynamic feels solid when the scene ends and the adrenaline drops. It might mean here noticing whether you feel more regulated or more braced around someone, right? You're not broken because you go back. You're wired for what feels familiar. But once you see that clearly, you are responsible for what you keep choosing, right? I've been talking a lot about responsibility. This topic keeps coming up. And I want to kind of come back to what I wrote something yesterday. Because yesterday I had talked about, I did a writing that the title of it was called Lead or Kneel, but Stand First. And what I was trying to convey there was similar to what I'm talking about today. You have to learn to be steady on your own before you can rely on somebody else, right? That's understanding all of this. So, as I always do, I'm going to leave you with a question to sit with. You all are getting much. I appreciate it. I'm loving the feedback. So, thank you. Comments on Spotify and, Instagram and Fat and a couple of other places, they're great. They're really getting to the core of this now. So, here's the question I've got for you all. When you feel that pull towards someone or toward a certain dynamic, are you choosing what feels intense in the moment or what actually feels safe when the intensity fades? Right? That's a big one for you. All right. A couple of other things. Number one, as of now, I've done some serious thinking about this and a little bit of the reflection from it. We are going to move into moments of kindness, right? As much as I want to shame some of to let you all know with some of the stuff that I deal with, we're going to start talking about moments of kindness because maybe that'll make me feel better. And I think it'll make the world needs to heal, people. The world's in trouble, right? It starts with us. We want change. Change starts with us. It doesn't start with saving the whales or pretending climate change or anything else, right? You can believe in what you believe, but it doesn't. If it doesn't, kindness doesn't start with you, right? And if you're like, oh well, the other person, I'm not asking you about the other person. I'm asking you about you. So, what was my act of kindness this past week? It wasn't big and it wasn't pronounced. Um, there was a woman I went shopping, an older woman, and she was struggling loading her groceries in the car. So I just asked her if she wanted some help. That was it. Nothing major. I did. Walked away. Didn't ask for a thank you. Just helped. She thanked me, and I welcomed her, but I wasn't there for that. Just a small act of kindness. I know people get defensive now but if you think about why people are defensive, it's because we don't talk to each other anymore. We don't say hello, right? Hi, how are you? How's your day? Right? When we're walking in somewhere, we just say thank you. I need to see Mr. So and so. Well, how about saying hi to the receptionist or being kind to your mechanic, right? I know it's their job, but we can be kind. So on top of this, I'd like you all to maybe tell me a random act of kindness you did or something you want to do, right? You want to go down and clean the kennels, volunteer at the your wherever they house animals in your country, right? Like we have the pound back in the States, and there's animal shelters and controls and private organizations. Go volunteer, right? If you love animals, some random act of kindness, right? I am doing my best, really am. All right. I want to answer something else real quickly because I got a quick question. Um, there was a lot of comments on my writing yesterday. I didn't respond to them. No, let me answer why. Because you all know that I do respond. I read every comment. Unfortunately, there was a comment that stood out that required my immediate attention. Um, it was the last and comment that I responded to on my post on Fetlife. I am not going to respond to anybody else because the I'm not doing this to call this person out, but the comment was a little bit upsetting in the way that they framed it, whether they intended it that way or not. Raise some issues, but you as a community can make up your own mind. You can see how I responded there. If not, it's not a big deal, right? I'm not looking for the dog pile, right? But I'm not going to start bringing this stuff to the show anymore. Positivity, right? Chris gonna add some more. We're gonna add a little bit of positivity to our king class, right? Maybe an extra spank or two, right? Extra dunk in the dunk tank, right? With a smile instead of a sadist scowl, something like that. Who knows, right? I am feeling a little bit brazen. We shall see. A couple of other things. Long term, there was a request for long term or long distance dynamics, and how do we keep those going? It's a good question. I'm working on the show for you. Uh, it's probably not going to come out for a while just because I've got other stuff slated. Um, but I promise I'll eventually get to it sometime this year. I don't know when. That's the best I can tell you. Next week, I'm going to be doing a two-part show. It's going to start with the writing, so you'll have to read that first. Yes, I know writing sucks. Thanks, Chris. We don't want to write. We just want to hear you talk. I appreciate that. I do. But I want to discuss this. What are we going to talk about? I'm going to expand on this a little bit in the preamble. So the preamble to this one is not choosing healthy or deep, but choosing what fits. It kind of goes with what we're talking about today. So it's going to be a little bit different, right? But I'm going to do the psychology writing first, and then you'll get the podcast next week on that one, right? Also, somebody asked me about my crime podcast. I am not going to be revisiting that right now, at least in the immediate future. The podcast took a lot. I didn't realize how much research I had to do, right? I just kind of went into it. I love it, but I can understand why these people have a team of like 3 or 4 research people going on and doing the show better. And I'm a one-man army right now. So yeah, it's on hold. It's not, I don't know if it'll make a return, right? But it might. Who knows? We'll see. Um, that's it. Let me know what you think today. Think about the question. Here it is one more time. When you feel that pull towards someone or toward a certain dynamic, are you choosing what feels intense in the moment or what actually feels safe when the intensity fades? Light up the comments. Let me know what you're thinking. Talk to me about this. Talk to others. Don't forget your random act of kindness, right? RFK, RAK, RAOFK, right? We're going to call it RAC. Random act of kindness, right? We'll leave off the off. Until next time, everybody, be safe and stay kinky.